This week, I was joined by the Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, and this is what she had to say. Kemi Badenoch, thank you very much indeed for joining me in the studio today. Shall we start by talking about David Tennant and his comments at that LGBTQ plus awards ceremony in the week? I mean, he said that you should shut up. He said that you should not exist. You then hit back at him on X, formerly known as Twitter. Clearly, you were very angry about it. I was quite angry on your behalf, as I'm sure were most of the GB News audience. Do you think he should apologise to you personally?
I think he should. I think he's probably regretting making those remarks, given the uproar all across the country. It's had a lot of cut through, but it also shows the scale of the problem we have. I mean, what was even more extraordinary is that a Labour MP, Dawn Butler, doubled down and said, I agree with him. This is what's coming. I keep telling people that it's not just Keir Starmer that you're going to get when you get Labour. You're going to have all these MPs with very, very bad politics, really dangerous stuff, wishing another MP doesn't exist. I mean, that's dangerous. And Keir Starmer has refused to condemn her, but also him, West Streeting, Bridget Phillipson, they've all said, oh, well, she's entitled to her opinion. And if you remember how they reacted when there were comments which emerged several years later that had been made in private about Diane Abbott, we didn't stop hearing about it for well over a week, I think nearly 2 weeks. So it's one rule for them and another rule for everyone else. They don't really care about racism. They just care about their own people. And in the same way that they've tried to come after me, I won't let them. They will try and go after other people if we allow them into government. I'm
just going to play devil's advocate on one point. Obviously, when he stood up on stage, he didn't mention your colour. You then condemned him as a straight white man. Was it about race, or is that just the context of these kind of comments for you personally?
It's not about race at all. It's about showing that they are hypocrites. And it wasn't about him being white or, I said he was a rich lefty white male. It's that they play identity politics and they have a ladder of who's up and who's a protected group. And by their own rules, in the same way as we've seen them in other circumstances, they criticize other people for going after black people, black women in particular. But when it's them, the rules suddenly change. And that's what I was highlighting. It doesn't have anything to do with his skin color. I don't judge skin color, but they do, except when they don't want it to matter, like in that instance.
Shall we clarify where you do stand on transgender people? Just for the record, make it clear, and then we can perhaps talk about how Labour are currently tackling the issue.
Okay. So I think that it is important that we give transgender people space and dignity to live their lives as they wish. And the people who suffer from gender dysphoria, we have done everything we can to look after. But what is happening is that a lot of people are saying that, oh, we're trans too, when they're not, so that they can access women's spaces. It wasn't as big a problem when those laws were brought in. It is now. We're seeing it with men competing in women's sports, claiming to be trans, taking their medals. We're seeing rapists being put in women's prisons. They weren't women when they were raping. They suddenly become women when they need to get into a softer prison. And that's what we're trying to stop. So all of this is not really about trans people. It's about the people exploiting the rules which were there to protect the tiny, tiny number of people who are actually trans, and also rules which are there to protect women and children in particular. That is why we have the regulations that we do about how to get a gender certificate. What Labour's doing is saying, oh, these rules are so terrible, you have to speak to 2 doctors, how humiliating, we'll make sure it's only one. Which means it's easier for you to find, a helpful doctor. We've seen this on the private side as well. People going to Gender GP, a very discredited clinic, to get what it is they need, puberty blockers, etc. So we just want to put safeguards in place to protect women and children, but also to protect trans people as well. I've never said anything negative about trans people. They are the ones who put words in my mouth. They are the ones who carry out the toxic debate, as we saw with David Tennant, as we saw with Dawn Butler and other Labour MPs. And I will never be silenced by them. I will never stop fighting, because there are a lot of women out there who need someone to give them a voice. J.K. Rowling is an example of someone who's done that brilliantly, used her high profile to fight for other women. As the Minister for Women and Equalities, that is what I will always do, whether or not I have this job.
Although, is it disappointing that the Harry Potter author has said, I still can't countenance voting for Labour despite having previously supported them both as a voter but also financially. But she hasn't gone so far as to say, I will vote Tory, which might be disappointing to you because you've absolutely been on her side on this.
It's always disappointing if people won't vote Conservative. So that's obviously what I'm about. But you can't make people vote in a way that they don't want to. And this should not be a Tory issue. This should be a cross-party issue. And there are a few MPs like Rosie Duffield who are on the right side of history on this. The problem is that too many MPs on the left, in Labour, in the SNP, in Liberal Democrats, are just desperate for celebrities to notice them. Please, please, David Tennant, notice me. That's why Dawn Butler is tweeting. They are in politics for the wrong reasons, for show business, to be noticed. They're not there to help other people. That's why they don't care about the woman in a prison who's got a rapist, in her cell.
Yes.
They're not interested in that. They know that's never going to be them. We have to, as politicians, we've got to think about those people who aren't necessarily lucky to be in the same circumstances that we are.
So Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson has basically said that she thinks it's okay for a man who identifies as a woman to use a woman's toilet, even if he/she hasn't undergone any gender realignment surgery. What's your response to that?
So this was why we said that we were going to change the law to make it clear that sex in the Equality Act is biological sex. She doesn't understand the issue. Many Labour MPs, I would say most of them, don't really understand what this is about, and they don't want to know. They don't want to know what's going on. They just want to sound nice so that their, celebrity friends and so on, all the lovies will think that they're nice people. And they're also confused about what the process is. Nobody asks you for a piece of paper or a certificate when you're going to the toilet. We all use sites to know who should be there and who shouldn't be there. What we're trying to prevent is people thinking that some men are allowed to be there if they say they're trans when they are not.
Yes.
And it's so the paperwork is long after things have gone wrong, and then you go to court. But it's so that people who own those businesses where they don't know what to do know that the law is on their side if they are right. At the moment, they don't.
Has Keir Starmer been clear enough on this? I mean, we had the conversation between him and Rosie Duffield. She said that only women can have a cervix. He said that's not right. He was then asked if women had penises. He said 99.9% of women don't.
It's just very confused.
Then there's the Tony Blair comment, women have vaginas, men have penises. He said he agreed with that.
I think he is very conflicted. He is all over the place on this. And people are all over the place when they don't have convictions and when they're just trying to tell people what they want to hear. That's what you see with Keir Starmer. That's why we call him Flip-Flop Starmer. And so what does this person want to hear? I will tell them that. And then you move to a different audience. And so you're all over the place. He has not rooted those comments in any conviction. And that's why I don't trust what he says. I don't trust what he says.
You're clearly a woman of conviction. You're being touted as a future leader of the Conservative Party, a future Prime Minister. Comparisons have been made with your robust approach and your clear ideology with Margaret Thatcher. What's happening to the Conservative Party right now, and you being so far behind in the polls, and this support from your original fan base going to Nigel Farage's reform must really hurt? This must be a very difficult election for you to be fighting.
It does hurt, and it is a difficult election. I am fighting my seat like it was a marginal. Normally, it would be a very reliable Conservative seat.
Yeah, you've got 27,000 majority.
Slightly smaller. It's smaller after boundary changes. But there is no safe seat in this election.
What, are you considering that you might lose your seat?
So all of my colleagues are fighting like we are fighting marginals. I have a strong record locally. I think that it's going to be fine. But when I knock on doors, I am meeting former Conservative voters voting reform. And it breaks my heart because I know that they're not going to get what they think they will get if they vote reform. You must
have sympathy with those former Tory stroke now reform voters because a lot of their beliefs will align with yours. I mean, you're known for being a fully throated right winger. You're a Brexiteer. You know, you make the arguments on the right very clearly, very cogently. And yet the criticism is that the Tories have failed them. The Tories have failed to match their manifesto pledges. They've failed them on tax because tax has gone up rather than down. They've failed them on immigration because it's gone up rather than down. And you're there fighting the good fight like many other Tories on the stump. But it's difficult, and it's also difficult to see these mistakes occurring in the national campaign beyond your control. The D-Day debacle, the betting thing. I mean, how do you turn it around with less than a week to go now until the polls close?
Well, I think we still can turn it around. And what I would say to those voters is, I understand. We have all had our frustrations, even those of us who've been in government, at what has happened. We think immigration is too high. The Prime Minister thinks immigration is too high. We had a system where we were told we'd only get 6,000 people coming in for care. Instead, we got many, many more than that, plus their dependents. But we are bringing it down. But the other thing I think we haven't done well enough is let people know just how much bad stuff we have stopped. People have no idea. I mean, when I was local government minister, the officials in the department wouldn't let me look at the social care funding differently. They said that if I used a formula that benefited councils that spent lots on social care, it would help elderly white Christian areas and would be discriminatory. I stopped that. If you have a Labour MP, that kind of stuff is going to happen. There's so much that we have been doing behind the scenes that people don't realise. I remember when there was that. Do you remember when Nigel Farage's bank account was closed by Coots? People don't know the work Conservative ministers did to intervene. We were speaking to them and saying, this is not right, because we own shares in the bank. We intervened. It's going to be Labour next time if people vote Reform or Labour. And if you listen to what Labour said at the time, they didn't care that Nigel Farage's bank account was being closed. Even though he is our opponent, we treat people fairly. If we do have a Labour government, I think that Reform voters and anyone voting anything except Conservative will understand that they will come for you. They will come for you in the same way we saw all of these people go after those people who had run Vote Leave, in the same way that we saw the endless, relentless attacks on Boris Johnson. They will come for if whatever 2 or 3 Reform people manage to get elected. But the difference is, it won't be Conservative ministers there, it will be Labour ministers. Like the woman who I was referencing earlier, who said she wishes I didn't exist. That is what's coming. And I'm very worried about that. A
couple of your Conservative colleagues have put their heads above the parapet and said, I will stand as leader. We've had Steve Baker, we've had Tom Tugendhat, we've had Penny Mordaunt hint at it if she retains her seat. Will you run for leader?
Well, I've said to everyone that I don't want to talk about leadership debates because my constituents actually say that they don't like us talking about ourselves. The most common thing that I've heard on the doorstep has actually not been immigration, but that they are tired of the endless personality politics and fighting. So in answering that question, I sort of succumb to it. People knew that I tried to run 2 years ago. I didn't win. Rishi Sunak is the one who had the confidence of MPs. And I think it's actually disrespectful if people are talking about what they're going to do after the leadership when he's still there. My job now is to make sure that I win my seat, that as many of my Conservative colleagues win their seats, and do the very best we can for the country. And that means supporting the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, in what is a very, very difficult job.
OK, well, let's put it a slightly different way that might be easier to answer, because I do appreciate your positioning on that, and we're still in the middle of this election campaign. What do you think a future Conservative Party should look like, perhaps depending on the result, which at the moment, if you believe the polls, isn't going to be great, and there's going to have to be a lot of rethinking of things on the right. What do you think the Tory party of the future should look like, Kemi?
It needs to be one that occupies the whole of the centre-right, not just the centre, because that's where we're losing to Reform. We're being hit on the left, being told that we're too right-wing, and hit from the right, being told that we're too left-wing. We've got to be a little bit broader in that direction. At the moment, we're a very broad church. We're a very broad coalition, which is why sometimes we disagree. Well, you say too broad, but clearly not so broad that we haven't been able to keep Reform voters. So there needs to be some kind of clarity that comes into place. People need to know that we are Conservative. People need to know that we are on their side, that we will defend defend them, that we won't let the left-wing activists come for them. We won't let Just Stop Oil block the roads and stop them from going about their daily business. People are so frustrated that things aren't working because a certain category of people are out there obstructing them. And I get that. I have the same thing in my job. This David Tennant thing is just the tip of the iceberg. I have unions trying to stop my staff working on things like the Israel FTA. They're trying to spoil work that we're doing, Downing tools. A lot of it is union activity. I've had The Guardian, for instance, messaging my civil servant saying, well, we took down Dominic Raab. Can you give us any bullying stories on Kemi Badenoch? And that's because the left is afraid of us. They don't want people on the right in power. They're constantly trying to take us out. So they will look for anything they can to smear our names. But we need to be there to defend not just ourselves, but all of those good people all around the country who are, understandably disappointed. We need to do better at showing them the good that we have done. It's been really tough. COVID, pandemic, every time we think, okay, now we can get back to it, something else happens and knocks us sideways. But we have still kept the stability. Imagine what it would have been like if we had Labour during COVID, or Labour when that initial Russian invasion to Ukraine happened. They would not have sent weapons. They would not have supported many of those good people, some who your viewers would even be having in their homes now. We still have a lot of Ukrainians staying in people's homes, being looked after, making friends. That would not have happened under a Labour government. Yes. They would just have left it and let Russia do what they like under Jeremy Corbyn.
So you have, as a party and as an individual in your seat, you're sort of fighting for your political life. But it sounds to me as if there's still quite a lot of fight left in you,
yes,
in the sense that whatever happens on July the 5th and you remain in your seat, then you have got the fight of your life on your hands to try and help to reunite the right.
We do. We've got to win the election first. We're still fighting to win. There's a few days to go. Anything could happen. I think the public are beginning to wake up to the reality of a potential Labour government if they don't vote Conservative. But we have to take each day as it comes. We have to take each battle as it comes. I don't want to be fighting next year's battle today. I want to be fighting today's battle today. And yes, you're all right. I am somebody, I don't go out looking for fights, but if the fight is there, you've got to see it through. You can't run away when there are difficult things to do.
Kemi Badenoch, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Camilla.